Welcome to the Valley College Connection, where John Kawai and Scott Wigan, two Valley professors, engage in a conversation about success with educators and students. Each week, they'll sit down with a different guest to find out ways each of us have had to plan, persevere, and overcome to where we are now. The show will also highlight resources and services that are working to make a difference at Valley College.
Hi, we're here with Tiffany Schwanz, a psychology student who is transferring to UCLA. So, Tiffany, welcome to the Valley College Connection.
Hi.
Take us back to some of your early memories in terms of school.
Well, I have always had kind of a different school experience than a lot of kids. And I think a lot of it does have a lot to do with I've recently been diagnosed, finally, as ADHD. Tends to be, girls are diagnosed a lot later, and partly just from the changes, and I can go into this later. There are a lot of reasons I have figured this out now. But if you look at my history through school, you can see it very clearly. And it doesn't have to be a problem. It's just, it's easier when you know. So if you look at, the first weird or different thing that I had with school, when I was in kindergarten, they actually had me repeat kindergarten. Like, who does that? They thought I wasn't mature enough, and it was because I was perfectly happy to do things like if we had a painting that we were working on, I could sit there and work on it, and I didn't care to finish, because I wanted to just keep playing with it, and they didn't understand that sort of a thing. I always liked reading. That kind of stuff was super easy for me. But then when it came to math and the more scientific, those types of courses, those were always a lot more difficult. I really, really struggled as I went through junior high and high school. I really could not get algebra at all. I even had a tutor, and the tutor basically gave up on me. She can't remember anything because that's just not what my brain did. While I was going through junior high and high school, I was starting to get very, very involved with ballet. The older I got, the more involved with it I got. So once I got to ninth grade, it was beginning to really impact my scholastic studies. And my parents were never, those parents that had been planning out your college career up, 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 and so forth. And so I didn't really have a lot of guidance in terms of school. And my mom always claims that I'm such a strong-willed person, but she couldn't do anything about it. So I got to do what I wanted to do, which, I think in some ways is fine because you kind of have to follow your own path to figure out what you want to do and what you're good at. But at the same time, I wish I had had a much better lead in terms of school. I think I'm figuring it out now, but I'm figuring it out 20 some odd years later from what people normally do.
So, what was the draw about dance that you love so much?
For a while, I didn't really know. Ballet, especially, it is kind of like living in a completely different world. For me, physical things are just so much easier for me to work on. And I think that's where the ADHD comes in. I believe that's what was affecting my math, this inability to focus, and the processing functions of my brain just didn't click enough for that. But with ballet, it's so easy it's essentially like, do you want to have strong arms? Okay, well, just sit here and do 20 bicep curls every day and you'll have strong arms. Easy. So ballet, while it's very difficult and you have to focus on all these different things at once, it's also very simple in terms of, do you want to do 32 patés in the finale of Don Quixote? Okay, well then go do, 100 releves every day. Eventually you build up that strength. But I always just loved the art of it. If you've ever swam in a pool and just felt how you can flow against or with the water, that's kind of how dance felt to me. And ballet, it's just such a magical profession to be fortunate enough to be able to be in. It's amazing. You spend every day once you get there, and I did. I joined a ballet company, a Colorado Ballet, as an apprentice, like very early. In fact, right out of high school, a little earlier than I meant to.
So, what did your day look like? So, when you were in high school, you would wake up and then would you go to school or would you start practicing? Like, what did your day look like at the time?
I would wake up and we would start with PE, which ended up being the thing that caused me to go to homeschooling, which was all centered around ballet because the rest of my day was totally normal. But as soon as I got out of school, whenever it was 3 o'clock, I would immediately head to ballet. And I had ballet classes from, I don't know, about 2 to 3 hours, maybe at least, depending on if there was a nutcracker rehearsal or a competition. I didn't do a lot of competitions, but when I did, there was a lot of extra rehearsals after those. And I'd be getting home. We were going out to Irvine, so I'd be getting home so late that I didn't really have a lot of time to do my homework. Falling behind a little in terms of getting my studies done and, falling asleep on the bed trying to do my homework. And then getting up to first thing go to that PE class, which I mean, I already exercise way more than anybody else just by being in ballet. And it was injuring me because ballet dancers, hips and joints, they work in different positions than just running track. So we talked to the school and we asked them, hey, we've got all these different things that prove that I'm getting all of this exercise, doctor's notes, etc. Can we just not do, can we call that like a free period and I'll be able to catch up on homework and then, keep going to normal public school? And they said, no, we're not going to make any exceptions. Sorry, tough luck. And so that's when I went homeschooled. And after that, it was just kind of a free for all. I don't totally recommend homeschool. You really have to have a parent that is dedicated to guiding you through and making sure you're doing everything and being willing to figure out different routes. If you need to have some more interaction for an English class, there are places you can go. I mean, they could have even been putting me into junior college classes to get some of that done more effectively, but my parents didn't really know about that kind of stuff. So that's where my scholastic studies really fell apart. And then from there, I just like bam, immediately got the Colorado Ballet apprenticeship, which was a really big deal. Apprenticeships are hard to get for ballet. And I had a ballet notebook. I was really good about being studious about ballet, more than anything else for sure.
So what's in your notebook?
Full of, and I just found it this weekend actually, and it's full of every correction I got from a certain time period. I wrote them down. And I also had pictures of dancers I really liked or companies I really liked, people that I was trying to emulate or I found inspiring. And so those are sort of sporadic throughout the book. And it's every note I got. So I could go back and say, I need to, if I'm doing this variation, I need to remember to extend my hand or my arm a little bit, or remember why I'm running to that corner. What's the thing that's motivating me to do that? And that was how I became a better dancer. And Colorado Ballet was amazing. This is where I really fell in love with. I was already in love with ballet, but being able to experience being in a company like that, oh my God, I could have lived in that even if I never moved up through the company and I was just always a quarter ballet dancer that every now and then got a solo or two. I would have been happy.
So how did you apply for this ballet company?
Well, obviously, this was before a lot of the companies utilized the internet. So I subscribed to several different dance magazines, and they always had lists in the back of the book that was, these are the ballet school auditions. I went to summer programs through these magazines. And they did the same thing with ballet companies. So you were able to really follow up and you knew who was looking. In fact, in my little dance notebook, I have a little section about the companies, because one of the ways you get into a company, I mean, obviously the best way is if you just immediately get into a company, but that's pretty rare. You usually end up going through an apprenticeship, and I think that's best. It's very difficult to just jump into a company. Company life is very different from just being a student. And so I have a little section in my dance notebook, and it has like the top three ballet company apprenticeships, and it was American Ballet Theater, Boston Ballet, and then Colorado Ballet. So it was kind of exciting to be able to look back on that and be like, all right, well, I did that. I was able to do that thing that I was looking at.
So what was the apprenticeship like? Did you once you get over there and once they accept you, like what does your day look like? You were what, 17 at the time or 18?
18 going on 19, I guess. I think it's 18. Dance years are actually kind of run similar to school in that the season is from fall to spring, and then you have summers off. You can think of them similarly. So you would usually start off with company class. Sometimes we had our own with the other apprentice dancers. It was usually, I think it probably started at 9:30. I don't remember anymore. It's been a while. But you would have an hour and a half class, everybody working together. You're trying to keep up with the company dancers, and then you would go into rehearsals. And sometimes that meant rehearsing with the company, and sometimes that meant rehearsing with the apprentice dancers. And we had our own shows that we would do. They were school shows. So we would get to do variations that we wouldn't get to do with the company, obviously. And then we would go around to schools and we would perform them. And then with the company, you were always trying to get into those company parts that maybe not all of the apprentices got. So, like, right off the bat, I got a part that none of the other apprentice dancers got because I used to be really good at picking up choreography.
Hmm.
And I was so excited. My first professional performance ever was in Dracula, which to this day is still my favorite ballet. And it was because I was good at picking things up. And my time at Colorado Ballet was very, back and forth like that. They would have all these other girls, like four other girls that got this part that I really wanted. And I was like, I know that that's mine. And then sure enough, I eventually got it. Or I wouldn't be doing hardly anything. Or like my last ballet with them, I did more than most of the company dancers actually, because they made me a pirate, which was basically just the soloist boys were pirates. And then I was understudying Koichi, who is normally, he would be Peter Pan. He was like one of their favorite principal dancers, male principal dancers, but he had been injured, so he was just doing Lost Boys. So I was understudying him in case like his knee became a problem. So that was another soloist part. Also, Martin really didn't like girls portraying boys, so it kind of was a sign of him trusting you a little. And then we got halfway through learning it, and they were like, you know what? Let's have you understudy the fairies too. So then I ended up understudying the fairies. I was kind of a tall fairy, but and it was crazy how fast I had to learn that. And meanwhile, all of the core dancers and even the soloists, they were maybe Indians, maybe mermaids. They weren't doing a lot. And then
This is for
halfway
Peter
through
Pan.
yeah, this is for Peter Pan. So they weren't doing a lot really at all. And then halfway through the run, the principal who was playing Tinkerbell tore her calf. And so sure enough, one of the other soloists who was alternating between being a fairy and being Tinkerbell, so she had to become Tinkerbell, and then I had to become her. And then I did that for like a week, and then oh no, somebody didn't tell us they weren't going to be here. Tiffany, you have to learn this other fairy, and then we have to teach somebody else that part. And meanwhile, I'm still being a pirate. So after all of that, they didn't keep me, which was crazy. I was like, I am doing more than most of these principals. And that kind of tells you how ballet goes. You can do absolutely everything, and maybe you don't have the right feet, the right legs. They'd rather just get more people working for free, whatever it is. That's ballet. When you're in it, it's so much fun because you're spending your whole time living in this fantasy world you're living in a fantasy world. You're make believing these characters, you're portraying them. It is a fantasy world because you spend all day on it. You don't have to, sit in front of a computer and do files or things like this. You're literally
Hmm.
just working on the art, which is amazing. It was, very hard to let go of that. As you know, I eventually got injured, and so I had to start looking elsewhere what else I was going to do.
So how did you get injured?
I just twisted my ankle way too many times. It's a pretty easy thing to do in ballet, and it just turned out that it was one too many times, and it turned into what is basically really bad tendonitis, extra
Hmm.
water in the tendon sheath. And I saw really good doctors at Cedar Sinai, and he was telling me, well, there's not a lot I can do for you. We could do a surgery, but that actually might make you worse. I've seen people come back from much, much worse injuries, but there's nothing that we can really do other than let you wait to heal and see how it goes. And it ended up taking about 2 years of me limping, just limping around the house. I couldn't go very far before it really hurt. And it took about 2 years before I felt like, okay, I can start leaving the house now and I can start doing something. It's kind of crazy to lose 2 years of your 20s to just not leaving the house at all.
Isn't it? I mean, I have the same thing too because I have tendonitis in my hands,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I'm always counting how many keystrokes. I have my day laid out and all my work laid out of I can only use my hands for a certain amount of hours and a certain amount of time and a certain amount
Right.
of space. And it's weird to just sort of partial out your hands or your body, especially when that is what made you, right? My hands,
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
really fast at typing and you are really great at dancing. And it's weird because it's this overuse syndrome, right? So
Yeah.
mentally it goes against our nature.
Yeah. 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 And it's weird when you go from something that you do a lot to not at all, especially
Mm-hmm.
with dance. Obviously, the more exercise you do, the more endorphins you have, right? So I was going from 6 days a week exercising for 8 hours a day because a dance rehearsal is like 8 hours a day, you know? If I was doing Nutcracker, we could spend 3 to 4 hours just on snow alone.
Sure.
So you suddenly go from all of that to nothing. I was already, having a struggle over losing my dream. And then I was a little physically depressed. That was probably the hardest part. You can reason yourself like, okay, well, dance is really hard. This has been hard on me mentally. Maybe I should start finding something that isn't so like just abusive to your soul every time you don't get into a company, you
Mm-hmm.
know? But it is a lot harder to get around that physical feeling because there's nothing you can do to replicate that much exercise and endorphins that you're used to living on.
Yeah. So what happened after Colorado?
They didn't end up keeping me, as I said, and I still had connections to my ballet school that I had trained at, Ballet Pacifica, and they had a small company there that performs at the Irvine Barclay Theater. And they had recently undergone a little bit of a transition and they needed some new dancers. And so I ended up going over there to be a company member. And actually, one of the guys from Colorado Ballet had kind of a falling out with the director. And so he ended up going there too, which is great because I still didn't drive. I had never learned to drive because the driving lessons were on Saturdays, which is when company classes were. And so I said, no, I'd rather be in company class. So I still hadn't learned to drive. I was walking everywhere. And so since he followed, we carpooled. So again,
Mm-hmm.
delaying my driving. It's crazy. I didn't drive till I was 25.
Tiffany, quick question. This might be like an obvious one, but just the name of the company, the Colorado company, was that in Colorado?
Yeah, it's the Colorado Ballet. It's in Denver.
Okay. And you went to high school that was out here in California?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that was the big transition when you finished high school and you went to join the company. You said when you were 17 or 18, and then you spent the 2 years out there in Denver, and then
Yeah, 2 years.
okay, so then you had the injury, and
Hmm.
then you
Well,
came
I
back.
didn't have the injury yet. I went to Ballet Pacifica and I was there for, it would have been a year, but the board decided that they didn't want, we had an interim director at that time, so it wasn't the normal director because they had kind of forced her out. And Ethan Stiefel of American Ballet Theater was supposed to come in and be the new director. I don't have very good feelings about him because he decided that he didn't want to work with us at all, and so once we did Nutcracker, he canceled our spring season. So it would have been a year, but he kind of
Mm-hmm.
came in and screwed it up, and the company never recovered from that because I don't know what happened. He didn't get the money. And I guess they thought him being a star would have gotten enough money, but it all fell apart. And it was a school for a while longer before somebody else took it over. And then I danced. It was a couple more years, basically. I danced before I got injured. I performed with Le Grand Ballet Canadien de Montréal, which was very exciting. It's one of the three biggest companies in Canada. In fact, they're one of the only ballet companies. I don't know if they still are, but at the time they were one of the only ballet companies that was actively in the black. So that's how well they were doing financially. They weren't in the red at all.
Hmm.
It was amazing. It's basically a company of soloists, but Nutcracker is, I mean, it's a requirement of a dance company. It's where you make the most money, of course. So they would hire out the corps de ballet, but it was a big deal. I was one of maybe four Americans that were hired as a corps de ballet dancer, and It was crazy. It's the only time I've been paid well. They gave me 20 pairs of point shoes, which is crazy because point shoes cost between $65 to $100 a pair, easily.
Mhm.
And given the right day, the right temperatures, the right pieces, I could kill a pair of shoes in like an hour, maybe.
No kidding.
I've I've been known to do that. Yeah. Ballet is not for people that don't have money for point shoes. Oh my goodness. Especially here in California. Oh yeah. I would have to switch them out to keep them alive because that's expensive. And when I was in Colorado Ballet, where I didn't have understudies in Colorado Ballet, when I did Nutcracker, I would alternate being one of Clara's friends, and then I had Snow and Waltz, and I never had understudies for Snow and Waltz. So we did 30 performances. I did every single performance. I had 6 pair of point shoes, I think. Like it was crazy. But here at Legrand, I had 20 pairs of point shoes, and I had alternates. Like I actually alternated with actual company members. It was amazing. Oh my god.
So let me ask you this. So after you got hurt, then what happened? I know you went through a sort of a depression, and then what
Yeah.
was your next step?
Well, I still didn't know what I wanted to do because, again, I had no impetus to go towards anything scholastically. I hadn't discovered anything. I hadn't been pushed or inspired, and so I had always really liked musical theater, and I still wanted to be on stage. I knew that musical theater, while it can be difficult, it's not as difficult as ballet. It's very different technical difficulty. Musical
Mhm.
theater, you have to be able to do a lot more things, and you're just not using that same harsh ballet technique that's hard on your body. And I was always terrified of speaking and singing, but something about when you go through something like, losing your dream like that and being stuck the way I was for so long, it really kind of removes some of your fear. It's hard to go through, but in some ways it does make you a much stronger person. So, yeah, I just wasn't scared anymore.
Sometimes that desperation, right?
Yeah,
It just
yeah,
removes like you're just sort of desperate for that feeling that you had before, right? I
yeah,
know what you're
yeah.
talking about.
Well, I had actually I went through two layers of this really because after Ballet Pacifica, I had a really hard time finding a job, a dance job. It's really hard to get a job. And so I think I basically went through a year of having no company anything. I went to Europe by myself to audition. I had some great auditions, but nothing quite worked out. And so I was really, really, in fact, I was probably more depressed then. I remember just being beside myself, crying in the dark like I never have really. And then when I got the Le Grand, sorry, that is so the wrong way to pronounce that, the Le Grand position, it's like suddenly it was a weight had lifted off, and it kind of taught me that, okay, it's going to be okay. Even if things are hard, things will work out. And my performance changed after that. I was less self aware when it came to showing emotions as I performed. I became a much better performer then. And then when I went through that second period of that depression, of that injury, I really got a lot more, even more bravery, it's kind of funny how that works sometimes. And so I jumped in and I went right away to Riverside Community College, was doing Beauty and the Beast for the summer. Just it was in connection with the school. You actually got school credit for it. And I took a class with South Coast Repertory. With Tom Shelton. I picked his class because I knew he had a background in musical theater, and I asked him if he wouldn't mind, helping me get an audition together. And I had never had any voice lessons, and he helped me put it together. But I sounded terrible because, boy, it took a while before I could had any connection to notes and could
Mhm.
find them. But I just did it, and it kind of just took off from there. And it was kind of the whole thing was a learning experience. I was constantly cobbling new things together, taking new classes, taking improv classes, taking tap classes. Tap was very difficult. Music was very difficult. But eventually I was comfortable. I started to get great pieces, great parts right off the bat because as a ballet dancer, there's just not a lot of other ballet dancers in musical theater in certain areas. Go to New York, it's a dime a dozen. But out here, I was like the only one. So one of my second shows, I got this big ballet. I had like a 15-minute pas de deux solo basically to myself. And after that, I
Mhm.
had 3 shows in a row from that because people had seen me. It was in Moonlight Amphitheater, kind of near San Diego. And I just immediately got into these bigger theater companies, which are actually very hard to get into because, it's always hard to break into something where people don't know you. And you kind of have to have like a big part like that. And then people are like, oh, who's that?
So how did people treat you when, as you were this newcomer, kind of breaking in, taking jobs from other people?
They didn't really see it like that because I was filling in a part that there wasn't a lot of competition,
Hmm.
I kind of was the only one. One of my really bigger parts that I got that was more impressive for some, I guess, was when I got Cats because Dana Solomondo, she's done it on Broadway, she's done it on tour, she's amazing, and there's a lot of Cats performances out there where you're not really getting the real choreography because they don't
Hmm.
really have the rights to it exactly, and you're not getting the real makeup, you're not getting the real costumes. But Dana, you get all of that, and she has her dancers that a lot of the people they tend to have done it a couple of times with her. So
Hmm.
you almost have the exact same cast. So it's very hard to get into, but I kind of walked right in there and got it because there weren't a lot of me, and I got to be Victoria. She's the white cat, and that was kind of amazing. And some people were cooler about it than others. Nobody was really like, oh, that should have been my part because most of them were singers, so it
Hmm.
wasn't their part. But there was a choreographer that I did Oklahoma with, and he was. I can't even remember how that worked, but he was really snotty about it. I had sent in a tape from me doing not Belladova, from when I was Maggie with Brigadoon. I had a big dance part as Maggie, and because of the show, I couldn't go to this Oklahoma audition, and I had already done Oklahoma once before, and I couldn't go to the audition, so because I knew the director of the whole theater, I had sent in a video of me doing Maggie, and then he gave my part to a tap dancer, and every time anything I did, he thought I was basically trying to make him look bad, I guess, because
Hmm.
he wasn't a strict ballet dancer, and so he I should have been Dream Lori, but I wasn't. And it just had to do with his own insecurities. And so he came to see Cats and he saw me at the stage door and he said, "Oh, good job. You pulled it off." I was very offended by that. I was like, that was a really snotty thing to
So do
say.
you still do theater?
Um, I haven't since I started going through breast cancer treatments in 2016.
Hmm.
And that was kind of what got me going towards school. I had been for a while. Once I started musical theater, I got certified in Pilates because that's what dancers do. And I'd always used a lot of Pilates. And I worked in a private studio. And for much longer, I was working in this all women's gym. A lot of the time, I usually got the clients that were more therapeutic. They were dealing with injuries, and it just seemed like I seemed to gravitate, or they gravitated towards me. I seemed to get the ones that always had other problems, and they always wanted to talk during Pilates. And I found that, it was like these sessions I was doing were half their exercises and half like, oh, okay, well, tell me about what's going on. Why is your daughter mad at the other daughter? Ah, well, okay, so here's what's happening. And I was like, am I giving the different kind of therapy? Maybe I need to start thinking about maybe psychology is something that I need to look at. And so in 2016, I hadn't been doing as much theater. It had been getting a little bit harder, and it had been starting to be like, there has to be something else that I can be doing too. It's not enough. It's not enough in any way, financially, emotional fulfillment. None of it was quite enough. And
Well,
so
did you make
when
a
I got
profit from theater? Like when you were doing
no,
theater,
no, theater,
is it a break
it's
even sort of situation
no,
where,
no, it's you're actually financing them in a way because
uh-huh.
if you are not equity, it's a whole thing. It is a whole mess. For way, way, way too long, actors have been getting the short end of the stick because you can't get away as a theater company. You can't get away with not paying musicians. They won't stand for that. You can't get away with not paying the guys that are doing the lights or the costumes. But you know who you can get away with not paying? Actors, because
Mhm.
they're so desperate for that part and there's so many of them. And so, yeah, I'll work for $100 a week or nothing. So even in the bigger companies, if you go to see a show at any of the big regional theater companies and you look through that cast list, anybody that is not equity, and it's kind of changing now a little bit with AB5 and all of that stuff, they're starting to have to be held accountable. But
Mm-hmm.
if you were to look at anything, the past 10 years, anybody that was not in equity, I can guarantee you was probably paid $1,000 for the whole thing or less.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 2 to 3 weeks of rehearsal and 3 to maybe 5 weeks of performances, $1,000 total. And you're kind of fed the lie that, oh, you're going to be able to, once you do enough, you're going to be able to go equity and you'll be able to make that equity paycheck, which is still only maybe 500 a week or
Uh-huh.
so, which it doesn't compare to other positions. And I had been doing it for a while and pretty consistently getting really good parts and good companies. And I was beginning to be very frustrated with that because, at some point you have to go, this is wage theft and this is not okay. This is abusive. I can't be doing this, 90-minute dance show where I'm on stage all the time and I'm spending all of my money on PT and physical therapy and massages. And I'm subsidizing your show because you're not really paying me. So I'm losing money because I'm not working at the gym. I'm cutting back on all of these things. I'm sure you can hear it in my voice how frustrating that is. And so that had definitely started to really wear on me. And it was starting to be like, all right, well, I'm not, 22 anymore. How much longer am I going to be, working towards maybe being on Broadway? And even if you are on Broadway, this is the sad thing. Even if you get to be on Broadway, that doesn't mean you've made it for forever. You're still hustling. Maybe you get one or two shows. It's a really difficult life that nobody pays you for, and it doesn't set you up for your future. It's honestly a dangerous path. I mean, it's amazing. Again, it's like ballet. If you can make it work for you, it's amazing, but boy, is it hard. So when I was diagnosed with breast cancer in November 2016, and I had recently started seeing my current partner, my boyfriend, and he had all of those influences that I was lacking. He had that mom that created in him or instilled in him desire to hit some of those educational goals and just as a person too, not just like, oh, I have to get the BA because that's what you do. No, it was also, and I had those desires in me too to be a well-rounded person. When that happened, it changed my outlook. And I had already been thinking about those things, thinking that psychology might be an interesting fit for me. And it definitely pushed me to make a decision that I probably should have made a lot earlier. I probably should have started going to school a lot earlier than I did. But sometimes you need that kind of like dramatic thing. And that dramatic thing was, oh my God, I am really going to have to get myself a job that is going to take care of my health care because who knows what's going to happen? Because I was diagnosed right around when Trump was put in. And
Mm-hmm.
I knew that that was potentially going to start being a real risk to my health care. I came through, thank God for the ACA and Obamacare. It took care of me completely, and I went through chemo with flying colors. I found it really quickly. I responded very quickly, and that kind of helped me to go, okay, well, let's let's keep going. This is a new start, right? You have a new lease on life. Let's What else can I do? And after doing some looking around, I discovered that there is this thing called dance therapy. You have to do all the same kind of education that you have to do for any general psychology degree, whether you want to be an MFT or what have you. But dance therapy, it would allow me to use the knowledge that I already have. And it's a growing new field. It was like, oh, well, that sounds like that might be kind of an amazing thing to work toward. And so that's what pushed me.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you there. Just wanted to get a check in on how old are you at this point when you're sort of at this crossroads when you discover dance therapy?
I was diagnosed with breast cancer at, I hate to say it, 32. So I was 32 when I was discovering all of this. It is not fun to go back to school in your 30s your brain works differently.
I will absolutely 100% agree with you. School at 30 and 40 sucks. I went back at
Yeah.
38. I'm with you.
Yeah. But that's part of what has actually made me even more interested in this as I've been going into it, is because I have all of these different experiences, I have a different view towards some of the stuff that I'm learning and the way I'm learning it, the way my brain is working. I said I was bad at math. I'm still bad at math. And my first math class, because I tested into the top of English and the bottom of math. No one was surprised. In fact, I had a worse reaction to how much math I was going to have to do than when I found out I was going to do chemo and lose my hair. Like, I had a panic attack. I started pacing the room. I was like, oh my God, like crying, like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to get out of this. Ah! I'm never going to be able to do anything else. But when I took that first math class, it was amazing how much faster my brain was working, and I was able to see patterns that I hadn't seen before, and I was able to see where, and I think this is where some of that ADHD was again. I recognize that now. I would do weird things, like I would have the right answer, and let's say the right answer was 8, and I would write down 4. I would go from my scratch paper where I had the right answer, and I would write down a different answer.
Right.
That's that ADHD, which I recognize now. But the way my brain felt when it was working and I was understanding the math and I was moving quickly with it, it felt like the way it worked when I was doing tap dance. And tap is very rhythmic and it's very mathematical because you're counting like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You really have to keep that rhythm and you have to move fast and at the same time kind of let go because you move so fast in tap. You can't really you kind of have to like get it in your body and then let it go.
Right.
And I'm fascinated with that correlation. And I want to explore how can we use that with kids that are like me who are having a hard time. If we're having a math lesson and half the class is lost and having a hard time, maybe we should all just stand up and learn a time step and sit down and go back to those, equations. Maybe that there's something there. And also, like I said before, I had an amazing memory. And if you think about what I was doing all day long, yes, I was working on my muscles, but I was really training my brain. Ballet class, it's nothing but memory work, really. A typical class, the teacher is going to teach you this combination of 5 counts of 8, 10 counts of 8, whatever it is. And so they're going to demonstrate it and they're going to say, okay, demi plie, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, come up, quarter bar forward, 5, whatever it is. And then you have to memorize that and then you immediately put that into action. I think that's where all my memory comes from because I haven't been doing that now. And my memory, oh my God, I miss my memory. It is not what it was.
Were you diagnosed in my class? Is that when you were starting to?
No, I literally just got that diagnosed this last semester because in chemistry and French I was really struggling, like I have not struggled before. And partly maybe it's because I'm at home, but ADHD, I would probably still be having a hard time. And now that I know a little bit more about how it works, and basically some of your executive processing is just not as fast. I think that's why, like, I would do a lot better with French 2 if I could take a whole year on it and not just one semester, because I really have to have time for it to settle in. And so when we're going super fast, my brain, it hasn't taken in all of that information. And so it's just not ready to flip it around yet. And so I'm already lost. And so I was just really noticing it. And as I was thinking about it, and partly the reason I was noticing this was I was in my the research class for psychology. I'm always trying to, when I have these papers to write, I'm trying to look at some of these ideas that I've been having about how things like dance or music can affect learning, because that's what I'm kind of really fascinated with right now, because I'm seeing it with myself. And my research question I had was, do physical activities have an additional benefit for some disorders over others? And so I was comparing ADHD to autism because they have some of the same mechanics and same challenges. They're not quite the same, but they kind of relate a little bit. And so, of course, I was doing a little bit more studying in it and like watching some YouTube videos. And I had always wondered if I was ADHD. Well, I wondered if I was ADD. I didn't actually think that I would be ADHD. My brother is ADHD and he is all over the place. he's classic ADHD. When I was a kid, I was diagnosed as like mildly ADD, but girls, they're diagnosed later generally. I mean, not always, but generally speaking, we tend to be more of the inattentive ADHD versus the hyperactive. And I'm definitely the inattentive. And that's always characterized with having a tendency towards being late, not being very organized, being easily distracted. As I was thinking about all of these things and suffering through, oh my God, chemistry, and oh my God, French too, I started to be able to recognize when my brain it was done. It was always about 45 minutes to an hour, and all of a sudden, wait, what were they saying? And I started to be able to recognize when my brain was just like, nope, nope, we're done with this now. But there was, another 2 hours left. So I was just beginning to be very frustrated because I'd already been getting a little bit frustrated before.
Hmm.
Partly, my brain has gone through a lot of stuff now. It's not just the lack of ballet, all the drugs and things with chemotherapy. And I started my first classes online while I was still going through radiation. All of these I'm actually on a lot of hormone blockers, which,
Hmm.
I'm sorry, TMI, I am on a medical menopause. Super fun. I burst out in hot flashes at all times of the day. It's awful.
I
And
remember you
so they
raised my
put,
hand. I remember you raised your hand in class. That's
yeah,
how I remembered you. First day of class, like, I
yeah,
just want to tell you. And my wife was taking the same medication, so I was with
yeah,
you. Like, I'm good.
yeah.
We're good.
Yeah, I know. I know. Well, and I remember I had tried to take one of your classes before, and you were like, "No, you're gonna need to take one before you take this class." And I went, "Okay, I believe you," because I know I just know from people talking about you, and you adjudicated one of my math tests, and I was like, "I got to go take that guy's class." And I knew that, all right, this guy's a good teacher. I just like knew it. So when you said, "Yeah, if you guys are lost now, you need to go and take another class," I immediately popped that class. But I had already told you that, so that was funny that you remembered.
Yeah.
But
I
so
think
they,
going back to like what you're saying, what I'm noticing is that I'm starting to see these groupings in terms of disability and the compensation skills that you get for overcoming certain things. So I know that
yeah,
1/3 of all CEOs have dyslexia. One
mm,
third of all entrepreneurs have dyslexia. And I do notice that a shockingly large number of chefs, really successful chefs, have ADHD. I do see this connection between cognition and certain disabilities, and that by overcoming that disability, you sort of work out a different part of your brain because you have to
yeah,
compensate for this part that is different from other people.
yeah. Well, and something else I'm learning about it, and now I understand why ballet worked so well for me and other things are difficult. ADHD, the way your brain works, is if it's not like the thing that you really, really love, you can't get your brain to turn that switch on. It just
Hmm.
doesn't switch. It doesn't want to. But when there's something that you really love, that's where you become almost obsessive about it. And I was obsessive about ballet, which is why I was able to progress because I wasn't really natural. I didn't really have a completely natural body. Like it was okay. Okay, bones. We can work with this. But, I'm not Sylvie Guillaume. But my obsession with it, I was able to mold myself into something that I wasn't, or I was able to mold myself better. And it's so fascinating, and you do see that like Howie Mandel, he's ADHD as well, I believe. I'm starting to learn more and more people. Once you find that thing that you are good at, it's no longer a problem. I think also doing something physical, that extra exercise, I think it's just also another way of focusing a little bit and kind of dispelling some of that energy.
Now, how did you make that transition to becoming a great student? Because you're transferring to someplace pretty special, right? Where are you transferring to?
I am. I'm so excited. I got into UCI, I got into San Diego, and I got into UCLA. And so I'm going to UCLA. Very excited and very surprised, frankly.
I wasn't surprised at all. I mean, I looked at your materials, I looked at everything that you sent to them, and it was pretty great. I mean,
Thank
as
you.
much as you talk down your academic ability, that isn't who you've become.
I've always been somebody that if I want to study something, I'm good at that. I used to be like a great reader. I went through a period where it was like, I'm just going to read all of the great Gothic novels. Let's start with Hunchback. And I have a high standard for myself. because I know that I'm intelligent. I just know that there are some areas that maybe I'm not the best at. I guess because I know that some areas I'm really good at and some areas I'm not the best. I understand that we don't all have to be brain scientists. So I don't feel bad about that. I don't feel bad about the areas that I am not great in because I know that doesn't define me as a student or as a person, or it doesn't really define my entire IQ, right? My entire
Hmm.
intelligence. It's easy to study the things you like. As you learn how that works with those areas you're good at, you learn how to try to do those same things in the other courses that you're maybe not so good at. Anytime I get a grade that I don't like, it's like, oh God, I don't want that. So what am I going to do to overcome that? Do a bunch of extra credit? Okay, great. A lot of teachers do allow you to do extra credit. And when you're struggling, then you got to ride that struggle bus and you've got to do what you've got to do to improve that. Because, I'm not going to do a lot of chemistry. So I'm not worried that I'm having a hard time learning it. I'm just worried about how that's going to affect my overall GPA and continuing on to something like UCLA. So if there is an extra credit I can do for that, I'm going to do it. It's just a little extra work.
And I know you're pretty good at advocating for yourself. Do you typically like talk to your teachers about what you can do or what changes you can make, or?
I do as much as I can, definitely. I'm still actually waiting for one of my teachers didn't put my final into my final grade, and I keep messaging her. Gonna have to figure out a new way around that because I'm a little frustrated with that. But for the most part, yeah, I definitely talk to people.
I love that about you. I mean, you had to like push your way into ballet. You had to push your way into dinner theater, and you just don't take no as an answer. I love students like that. This I'm gonna fight for my every opportunity.
Yeah, you kind of have to. And I learned that through theater and stuff like that, like finding my good voice teacher. I learned a lot that you have to be responsible to yourself. He would always say, if I'm not here, if I die tomorrow, how are you going to get better? And I've tried to apply that to everything I'm doing. When I'm teaching kids, I always tell them, like, well, if I'm not here, how are you going to keep being a better ballet dancer? I'm giving you these Pilates exercises that I use to be a better dancer. It's up to you if you want to use them or not. In addition to that, definitely going through cancer, and I have to give a lot of credit to my boyfriend. He definitely gave me a lot of extra strength at that time, and he kind of taught me a little bit too, because I still sometimes would shy away from like demanding what I have to have, because that's a little different than just continuing to work on yourself, which pushes you forward. Going up to somebody and demanding what you need is a
Hmm.
little different. And he kind of taught me that because we went through a lot of different surgeons for my surgery. And the first guy, I was like, I don't know, I don't think so. And he was like, no. And that kind of taught me that, yeah, say no to people and keep pushing until you get the thing that you need. And you really have to be your own advocate because nobody else is going to run your life. I definitely learned that in terms of trying to figure out my course here. You can't rely on the counselors to plot out your whole year. I mean, they're kind of helpful, but you really do have to sit down and figure it out for yourself. And if that means talking to someone amazing like you, who is super helpful and is unafraid to tell you the truth and give you some really good guidance, then that's what you got to do. And sometimes that's luck. I was lucky that you happened to come in and help with that test. And I immediately got the feel that this is somebody that I need to take a class from at some point. And, I was lucky that I was right. But you can't always rely on luck. You have to keep looking and keep trying to find those people or find those ways. And that is definitely hard, but you just can't wait for it to happen. You have to go out and find it.
Tiffany, what do you see as your next step here? So you're transferring to UCLA in the fall.
Well, I'm still exploring some of it exactly. Ballet, I had so many years of knowing exactly what I was doing already. It was very easy for me to navigate it. I'm still kind of catching up on that in terms of, psychology is still fairly new for me, but the more I go into it, the more I'm learning that there are a lot of different avenues that I might be interested in. I went into it initially with the idea of this dance therapy. And also with this idea that I want to explore different ways that we can utilize our physical exercise and psychology, traditional couch therapy, because my experience with teaching, I found that people tend to just they kind of want to talk when you're doing that. And I know that people are sometimes nervous or not confident in opening up to a therapist. So I think that there might be a way of combining yoga or Pilates with individual therapy sessions for people that are maybe a little bit more shy. I also think that we don't connect our physical health to our mental health nearly as often as we probably should because we live in these rat races where we're all just work, 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 get home, make dinner, feed the kids, whatever it is. I think that there are ways that we can maybe make that easier for people, So I kind of want to maybe work towards having my own center at some point, but right now I want to get that degree. I want to look at either I haven't decided if I need to be looking at a PhD or a master's yet, but definitely one of those. Possibly going to school in England. There are a lot of the dance and drama type therapy degrees that are a little bit more prevalent out there for whatever reason, because there's only 5 colleges, I think. It might have changed by now, but last time I looked, there were like 5 universities here that actually do a straight up dance therapy degree. Otherwise, you kind of have to build your own. But it's pretty common. I mean, there are a lot more, I think, in England, and I'm very interested in incorporating maybe drama therapy as well because I have I know as a person I have benefited a lot from improv. I am still trying to figure out how I can include this educational part of it because I feel like kids would just they would really benefit so much from things like improv and maybe more of these dances and music and therapy themselves, there's so much. I'm still trying to like narrow it all down.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us, and I hope you keep both of us in the
Oh, I
loop.
definitely will.
Thank you so much. That's such an incredible journey that you took us through and time that you've shared with us today. I mean, it's as though you've lived multiple lives already with all the different experiences that you've had. And, just want to wish you the best in moving forward and having a fantastic semester and experience at UCLA.
Thank you so much. Oh, I'm so happy to do it. John has already helped me so much. I feel like, yes, anything you need. You
Thanks,
need me to talk for
Tiffany.
3 hours? Totally willing to do it.
Okay. So thank you.